All right, let's just dive right in. We're about to break down a pretty wild metaphysical theory that tries to explain, well, everything, from consciousness to reality itself, all leading up to one seriously mind-bending idea, that God, or the Most High, is actually a causal loop.
So the whole journey into this idea starts with a really interesting question. Think about that constant inner monologue you have, the voice in your head you're probably using to listen to me right now. What if that's not something everyone has? What if some people are just walking around without it? This one question is basically the key that unlocks this entire framework.
So the theory kicks off by saying that to really get a handle on our reality, we have to first accept a pretty radical idea. Not all humans are running on the same software, consciously speaking. It suggests that humanity is actually split into 5 very distinct groups.
And here they are. The theory breaks humanity down into these 5 groups, and it traces their origins to some pretty interesting places. First, there's a Neanderthal line from Genesis 1, then the Adamic line from Genesis 2. You've also got the Nephilim, which are described as hybrids of angels and humans. And then it gets even stranger, proposing a 4th group called NPCs. Yep, like non-player characters from video games, or clones, which it claims came from those incubator baby exhibits back in the late 1800s. And finally, number 5 is just a mix of all the others.
But the most important distinction here, the one this whole thing hinges on, is the difference between that Adamic line, or man, and these so-called NPCs. And it all comes back to that inner monologue. One has it, the other doesn't. And that split goes deeper. One line supposedly has ancestral memory and a kind of built-in gut feeling or discernment. The other is described as a blank canvas, way more easily influenced because it's missing that deep inner context.
To try and make this concept a little more real, the source of this theory told a pretty personal story about his ex-wife. He started to get this feeling that she was only ever reacting to him, but never initiating anything herself. So he tried an experiment. He just stopped saying, "I love you," and he stopped initiating any physical contact. The result? They never said it or touched again. He came to believe, as the quote says, that she was just a mirror, simply reflecting his own energy back at him.
Okay, so if those are the different kinds of players in the game, what about the game board itself? That brings us to Section 2, which is all about how this theory sees reality by, well, stepping through the dimensions.
To wrap your head around higher dimensions, it's actually way easier to start by stepping down. And this illustrates it perfectly. Imagine you take a slice out of a 3D cube. What do you get? A 2D square. Take a slice of that square, you get a 1D line. And a slice of that line, you're left with a single 0D point. See the pattern? Each dimension is just a cross-section of the one above it. So if we just reverse that logic and go up, what is our 3D reality a cross-section of? Well, that would be the 4th dimension. This is a reality where our entire universe, past, present, and future, exists all at once as a single object. The book analogy is just perfect. The whole story, from the first word to the last, is already there. We, down here in the 3rd dimension, are just experiencing it one page at a time.
And if you can believe it, we're going to step up again to the 5th dimension. This is described as the realm of pure potential. It's an infinite collection of all of those 4D books, every possible timeline, every single choice you could have made, every universe that could possibly exist. All of it is just sitting there as pure probability. So we have these different types of humans and this incredibly complex, multi-dimensional reality, which leads to the obvious question, right? How do we interact with any of this? Well, Section 3 argues that the tool we use to navigate these higher planes isn't some crazy device. It's something you have right now, your imagination.
I mean, this is the million-dollar question that connects our little individual minds to this massive cosmic structure. If all of time and all possibilities are just out there in these higher dimensions, how do we, from our limited 3D perspective, even get a peek? The theory says it happens every time you daydream, every time you create something new, every time you just imagine.
And here's another great story from the source to really drive this point home. Back in the late 80s, he designed his dream 2-seater sports car. I mean, he meticulously designed it, even built a scale model. He never built the real thing, but 7 years later, he's walking down the street, and there it is. An almost identical Mazda MX-5. He calls it Project Dogshit, and for him, it was all the proof he needed that his focused imagination had somehow manifested in the real world.
So according to this theory, there's a 3-step mechanism for how this works. Step 1, you use your imagination to create a super detailed concept. You're basically writing a new page in that 4D book of time. Step 2. That idea then becomes a potential timeline, a brand new probability floating in that huge 5D ocean of possibilities. And finally, step 3, with enough focus or energy, that specific probability gets pulled out of that potential state and collapses into our physical 3D reality.
And this all brings us to the final and, frankly, the most profound part of this whole idea. We've talked about the players, the game board, and how we interact with it. So Section 4 takes this all to its logical and paradoxical conclusion. Who or what started this whole thing? Before we get too cosmic, let's use a really simple example you've probably seen from Back to the Future. Marty McFly plays Johnny B. Goode at the dance in 1955. Chuck Berry's cousin hears it over the phone and plays it for Chuck, who then goes on to write it. But of course, Marty only knew the song in the first place because he'd heard Chuck Berry's version in the future. So where did the song actually come from?
This kind of paradox has a name. It's a causal loop. The information, in this case the song Johnny B. Goode, it doesn't have an origin point. It was created because it already existed. It's a totally self-contained, self-creating loop. Now hang on to that idea, because the theory applies this exact same logic to God.
So, according to this theory, the ultimate purpose for humanity is this grand journey of ascension. We are supposedly here in the third dimension to learn and master the lesson of good versus evil. The souls who get it right move up to the fourth dimension for the next lesson, and this just keeps going on through an infinite number of dimensions.
At each dimensional jump, some souls are left behind. The theory describes this as a huge process of refinement, of filtering and honing consciousness over and over and over again, until, eventually, there's only a single unified consciousness remaining.
And in that final moment, when that one last soul finally achieves awareness of all dimensions and all possibilities, it becomes and gives rise to the Most High. Our collective journey through infinity is what creates the very consciousness that, in turn, created the universe for us to start that journey in the first place. It's the ultimate causal loop. Which leaves us with one last fascinating question to just chew on. If reality really is a loop, where we end up creating our own creator, does that mean we're experiencing this at the beginning of the process? Or are we just a memory playing out at the very end? Or, in a true loop, is there even a difference?